He had spent his entire life working the land. Holding out his hands for charity was unthinkable. I must find work, he resolved, clenching his fists. However, work was not easy to come by for the poor. The city was already overflowing with desperate laborers, and country folk like Wang Lung were the last to be chosen. Eventually, he managed to find small jobs carrying firewood for the wealthy and sweeping the streets. He worked from dawn till nightfall, yet the meager wages he earned were barely enough to buy a handful of rice. Meanwhile, Olan wandered the streets, searching for discarded food. At times, she found scraps of stale bread or wilted vegetables, which she brought home for the children. "Eat," she said quietly, handing the food to them. "You must eat so we can endure." Discrimination in the city. The city did not welcome them. The wealthy scorned the poor, and the sick were abandoned in the streets. One evening, as Wang Lung returned from work, a rich merchant called out to him, "You there, carry this palanquin for me." Wang Lung struggled to lift the heavy load, his body aching with exhaustion. But when he reached the destination, the merchant sneered and refused to pay him. "I have no money for a country bumpkin like you." With that, the man disappeared. Wang Lung clenched his fists in anger but said nothing. He thought of his starving family and quietly walked on. Hope in despair. One day, Olan went to the market, hoping to find leftover food, but a wealthy woman drove her away. However, an old woman called out to her, "Are you willing to work?" Olan nodded without hesitation. The old woman took her to her house and had her wash clothes. Olan worked tirelessly all day, her hands cracking from the rough labor. Yet, in the end, all she received was a small piece of dry bread and a few coins. That evening, Olan shared the bread with the children and said softly, "Just hold on a little longer." Wang Lung nodded. Though they were suffering greatly in the city, he refused to abandon hope. "We will survive." They were still hungry, but they clung to each other, enduring one day at a time, determined to stay alive. Rebellion and opportunity. Wang Lung and his family endured their hardships in the city, struggling to survive each day. The streets remained filled with the starving and the desperate. Yet, amidst the despair, signs of change began to emerge. Rumors and unrest. One day, in the middle of the marketplace, a man shouted, "While the rich hoard sacks of rice in their warehouses, must we starve to death?" His cry sent murmurs through the crowd. Soon, people all over the streets began voicing their discontent. Wang Lung, standing nearby, felt his heart race as he listened. Something big is about to happen. Tension filled the city. Soldiers were stationed on the streets, and the wealthy built higher walls to protect their homes. The beginning of the revolt. It wasn't long before chaos erupted. The starving masses gathered and stormed the homes of the rich and their grain warehouses. "Give us the rice. Must we starve while you feast?" Wang Lung quickly hid his family inside their tent, shielding them from the turmoil. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, he realized he had to make a decision to ensure their survival. A moment of opportunity. He hesitated. Should he join the uprising or stay out of it? Instinct told him that survival was the priority for himself and his family. Following the crowd, Wang Lung saw people surging toward the mansions of the wealthy. He hesitated before stepping forward. The mansion doors had already been broken down, and people were pouring inside, seizing whatever they could. Wang Lung stood frozen at the threshold. I am not here to steal, but if I miss this chance, we may starve to death. Cautiously, he stepped into the house and searched the kitchen. His eyes fell upon a sack of rice. He hurriedly grabbed the sack and rushed outside. While others took gold and silk, Wang Lung took only what mattered: food for his family. When he returned home, Olan looked at him with wide eyes and asked, "Where did all this come from?" Catching his breath, Wang Lung replied, "We won't go hungry for a while." A new beginning. After the revolt settled, the city remained in chaos. Many of the wealthy had fled, and soldiers roamed the streets, trying to restore order. But Wang Lung no longer saw a reason to stay. "We must return home." He loaded the rice onto a cart, gathered his family, and set off on the long journey back. It was time to start anew in the land they once called home. Hope blooming from the earth, Wang Lung and his family finally left behind their long and difficult life in the city and returned to their homeland. In their hands, they carried rice and a little money they had acquired in the city, but more importantly, their hearts were filled with hope, the hope of starting anew. Returning home, Wang Lung pulled the old cart along the dusty road. Olan walked behind him, tending to the children, while his aging father rested with his eyes closed atop the cart. "We're finally back," Wang Lung said as he stood at the entrance of the village. The sight before him was different from what he had once known. The fields, ravaged by famine, lay barren. Houses stood abandoned, and the faces of those who had remained were gaunt with hunger. Yet, despite the desolation, Wang Lung felt joy. "This land will accept me again," he whispered, running his fingers through the soil. Hope blooming from the earth, Wang Lung and his family finally left behind their long and difficult life in the city and returned to their homeland. In their hands, they carried rice and a little money they had acquired in the city, but more importantly, their hearts were filled with hope, the hope of starting anew. Returning home, Wang Lung pulled the old cart along the dusty road. Olan walked behind him, tending to the children, while his aging father rested with his eyes closed atop the cart. "We're finally back," Wang Lung said as he stood at the entrance of the village. The sight before him was different from what he had once known. The fields, ravaged by famine, lay barren. Houses stood abandoned, and the faces of those who had remained were gaunt with hunger. Yet, despite the desolation, Wang Lung felt joy. "This land will accept me again," he whispered, running his fingers through the soil. A fresh start. As soon as they arrived, Wang Lung rushed to his fields. The once thriving farmland was now overgrown with weeds, and the irrigation channels had dried up. But he did not despair. "We can make it fertile again," he said with determination. Together, he, Olan, and the children began working. They tilled the soil, dug new irrigation ditches, and poured water onto the parched land. Wang Lung's hands quickly became rough and calloused, his body drenched in sweat as he wielded his hoe. Olan, as always, worked silently beside him, planting seeds and carrying water. Even the children helped, their small hands smoothing the soil and spreading fertilizer. "We can start over," Wang Lung murmured to himself. Rain and renewed hope. A few days later, clouds began to gather. The sky darkened and soon, thick raindrops began to fall. Wang Lung lifted his hands to the sky, letting the rain wash over him. "It's raining. The rain has come." A broad smile spread across his face. The rain soaked the dry earth, filling the empty ditches with water once more. The long parched soil absorbed the moisture greedily, and Wang Lung saw hope in it. "This year, we will have a good harvest," he said firmly, gazing over his land with renewed determination. The land's reward. Days later, Wang Lung walked through his fields. Tiny green sprouts had begun to emerge, pushing their way through the soil. He knelt down and gently touched one of the tender shoots. "We won't go hungry anymore," he said softly. Ulan nodded, a faint smile appearing on her lips. For the first time in a long while, Wang Lung felt true happiness. The land had not abandoned him. It remembered his toil and devotion and was now rewarding him in return. In his heart, hope bloomed once more. This is our new beginning. Hope, born from the earth, was once again lighting their path forward.